Hello there, fellow Cryptid Slayers! My name is Stanley557. Extinction, a game mode some of you may know as that one storyline that got completely ruined in The Beast from Beyond, others know it as that third mode in Call of Duty Ghost, and some of you may know it as that really cool alien side experience Call of Duty did once and never again. Extinction is one of my favorite side modes in the entire franchise. It has the right level of difficulty, a true co-op experience, varying classes and setups to try, and a linear level format that forgoes the quest-style gameplay invented by the Black Ops Zombie series. Extinction has been, and always will be, a breath of fresh air, and after reviewing IW, AW, World War II, Cold War, MWZ, and a rear review of IW, man, we've done a lot on this channel, it only seems fitting to continue to avoid the core series and review the final non-Treyarch Horde co-op mode. What makes Extinction such a great idea? Why has it stood the test of time? And what does it do differently than its contemporaries? Well, strap yourselves in, gear up, and prepare to fight for humanity's survival in Call of Duty Ghost's Extinction mode. The best co-op mode in the entire franchise? Developed by Neversoft, Extinction would be the last project the team would work on before being bought out and becoming a part of Infinity Ward, where much of the staff would go on to work on IW Zombies. Extinction was invented by a creative need to change up the formula of Call of Duty in the same way that Zombies had for Treyarch, with project director Brian Wright stating that they wanted a mode that incorporated different layers of combat that involved vertical engagements as much as horizontal, with the developers wanting a dynamic enemy that challenged players on various different levels. Inevitably, the decision was made to choose the aliens, these animal xenomorph-looking hybrids, as the primary antagonist. And thus, Extinction was born. I think this mode is a ton of fun, and it accomplishes exactly what it set out to do, creating a co-op team-based experience that benefits from systems that make a co-op game mode enjoyable. Unlike Zombies, which has slowly turned into a multifaceted project that promotes solo play as much as co-op. Also unique to Extinction, the mode features a linear approach to gameplay, which allows the developers to fine-tune the equipment, enemies, and level design that you'll be facing, with the game mode offering a unique progression system that rewards you with both in-game and out-of-game upgrades that are better balanced than systems like the Ethereum crystals from Cold War, but not as arduous as the perk system from Vanguard. Honestly, the best way to describe Extinction is taking the best aspects of both campaign and zombies, and blending them together to create this really unique side mode. Extinction is a co-op mode accurately designed around each of its various features and map aspects, and I believe this philosophy shines through just about every facet of the gameplay, from the difficulty of the early game to the action movie chaos created by the endgame. From the get-go, players can get set up with a variety of tools, each designed with various features, like your inherent skill class, your starting weapons, and the D-pad buttons. While there are abilities and tools that are more viable than their competing counterparts, difficulty and ease of combat in Extinction are more or less dictated by you and the loadouts you and your teammates spawn in with. Want to be the team medic? Then run the medic class with regular ammo drops, team boosters, and sentry turrets. Thinking of going in with the maximum amount of firepower? Then run weapon specialist, incendiary ammo, armor, vulture drones, and IMS launchers. Feel like being the team support? Well then run engineer, team boosters, and the sentry turrets. There is a ton of creativity with what you use, but no class will truly outshine the other in the wrong hands. The weapon specialist excels at reload speed and featuring the highest damage out of any class. The engineer can repair the generators the fastest, activate traps more often, and provide the team with quicker access to numerous support items. The medic has the ability to revive teammates faster, is immune to toxic gas created by some of the game's more threatening enemies, and has a built-in movement speed increase that allows for quicker maneuverability. And the tank has the ability to take more hits and pull the enemy away from their allies. Each of these classes cover different aspects of the game, and unlike what World War II and BO4 try to go for with their loadout systems, players are given multiple unique advantages for the class that they pick. This provides nuance and agency to the choices that you make, and further enhances gameplay in a way that Black Ops 4 only dreamed about. Then there's the out-of-game upgrade system. By playing various and more difficult games of Extinction, you'll obtain a new resource called Teeth, which are used in the game's armory shop. By spending this lucrative currency, you'll unlock permanent game-changing upgrades, such as taking decreased damage, no longer being stunned in place by one of the game's heavy enemies, a super ability for your chosen class, such as a revive circle for the medic, a static field which blocks all incoming attacks within the vicinity for engineer, an unlimited clip and further damage bonuses for weapon specialist, and becoming immune to all harm and attracting enemies with the tank. There's also upgrades that improve your equipment, allowing you to find powerful damage-increasing weapon attachments, create a deadly 5th ammo type, and wield the ability to use 2 different classes, which sadly we won't be seeing in this review as that requires you to collect over 1,000 teeth, and I am but one man who won't use a teeth exploit, and it doesn't help that you can only average about at most 20 per day, if you're not the best at the experience and you don't min-max your rewards. This system is invaluable, and unlike Cold War, you can actually turn off these bonuses whenever you would like, giving players more options than ever. Then there's how intel is handled. Just like Cold War, intel is found in-map and for completing the experience for the first time. This intel provides players with concept art, audio files, and the way to replay intro and outro cutscenes. Just like in Cold War, this is a perfectly serviceable system and provides players with a deeper narrative experience if they choose to seek it out. Regardless, the main narrative beats are expressed to you in the map and in the cutscenes, and there's only about 10 pieces of intel per map, making it easy to hunt down compared to the around 1,000 that there are in Cold War. And finally, there's the relic system. Each of the systems previously brought up are meant to help players, but relics were created to make the experience more difficult. Each relic rewards players with experience and teeth, and they can be equipped equal to the player's prestige. So if you're prestige 7, you can equip 7 out of the 10 relics. But seeing how difficult some of these are, you'd be crazy to equip more than 4. Each relic stacks with the last, and as such, your XP reward is boosted by 20% per relic. Relics include taking 25% more damage, pistols only, smaller wallet and less cash earned per kill, no specialist class, deal 33% less damage, slower health regeneration, and no health regeneration happening while you run, while also enabling fall damage, move slower and no reloading while sprinting, no equalizers or strike packages, ammo refills give you less ammo, and finally, no ammo type and team support items are available, as well as the inability to craft, scavenge, or pick up items from other players' equipment. I personally rarely play with relics, but the fact that the system is even in the game is something to be brought up and praised, kind of like the difficulty settings from Black Ops 4 and Black Ops 2. And the bonuses it gives to your teeth and experience is appreciated, especially when you need over 2,500 teeth to upgrade everything in the armory, with well over 1,000 of that just going to the double class. This system is meant to challenge you, while giving you more ways to play than ever before, adding an extra layer to an already robust game. And how could I forget about the money sharing system? By holding down the aim down sight button and jumping for 3 seconds, you'll drop 1,000 points. This is incredibly cumbersome, but hey, something is better than nothing, especially in a co-op mode. And those are all the main tools that you can use in Extinction. There are a ton of comparisons to make between future iterations, including Black Ops 4, Cold War, and even the newly released Black Ops 6. Hey, are you seeing how long I wrote the script? I'm talking about the newly released Black Ops 6. We are in April! Each of these entries suffer from gameplay feeling samey and the loadout system not doing enough to force players to shake up their gameplay loop, and every match of Black Ops 4 plays nearly identical to the last, and the loadout system has been redundant due to the game not offering enough tools that differentiate how you play. For example, in Black Ops 4, Cold War, and Black Ops 6, whatever lethal equipment that you choose to load in with, or find, does pretty much one thing: kill. This provides no ability for class setup or difference in player build style. The Blast Trap does the same thing that the C4 does, which does the same thing that the Wraithfire does, which does the same thing that the original Frag Grenade does. You could not use these things differently if you tried. The only thing that changes is simply how effective they are, with the Wraithfire being overly powerful, whereas a Sentry Turret kinda sucks. But in Extinction, you have a bunch of tools. For example, in the support slot. In this slot, you have 4 unique items: Team Explosives, which drops additional lethal equipment, Feral Instincts, which gives you the ability to see enemies through walls, heal faster, and increase movement speed, Armor, which provides you with additional defense against enemy attacks, Team Boosters, which increases weapon handling and drill repair speed, and Random Supplies, which can drop support items and, well, random supplies. While the armor drop is easily the most powerful of the bunch, the glory of Extinction is that not everyone needs to run it, and it's best advised to split who carries what item. Maybe you have 2 people carry armor, 1 on Team Boosters, and 1 on Feral Instincts. Each of these items cover different fields, and they have a variety of applicable use cases. It's not like Black Ops 6 where you can just load in and choose to use a single grenade that, by golly, can help you in one specific combat scenario. Like Black Ops 4 almost accomplishes this with the specialist weapon system, with the Staff of Ra providing excellent support capabilities, the Hammer restoring armor while using it, the Chakrams providing defense and speed, and the Viper Dragon providing a Monkey Bomb effect. This almost works, but besides the Staff of Ra revive effect, the other 3 specialists hardly have any game-shaking differences, and preference between those 3 is usually divided by which one the player prefers, which further reinforces Black Ops 4's gameplay monotony, but I'm going on a tangent at this point. To reiterate, Extinction does a good job making its tools expansive, well worth the price, and varied based on player preference and team necessity, with the latter often being forgotten or foregone in these co-op experiences. In Extinction, it's either team up or die. This game mode is truly one of a kind, and no other game in the series has been able to commit to the level of player setup and freedom quite like Extinction, and the maps do not disappoint. So strap yourselves in as we begin our adventure with Point of Contact. Following the events of the Ghost campaign, Point of Contact takes place in an alternate universe where the Odin orbital laser strikes Caldera Park, Colorado, revealing an underground hive of aliens known as the Cryptids. In an attempt to quell their fury, the United States sends in SIF Team 4 to arm and activate a nuke, but they are killed just before detonating the device. You now play as Spectre 1, and the story is presented to you as such the minute you load into the map.
Come through this town, went MIA. Look at this place. It's been a bloody battleground since they were unearthed. Spectre 1, take this drill and destroy any hives on your way to the crater. Arm that nuke and haul ass back here. Let's go. Good luck, gentlemen. All right, you heard the man.
The story is as bare bones as it gets, and this is one of the map's strongest traits next to its gameplay. There's no flashy cutscene and no long pedantic monologues. Extinction gets straight to the point, and like what I wanted IW's story to be, the game tells an extremely simplistic narrative that benefits from the brevity a story like this needs to be told. Point of Contact is a straightforward experience, and honestly works really well as a pilot or a proof of concept rather than an insane envelope-pushing event, and I think it accomplishes what it sets out to do in spades. Objectives are simple, players are slowly introduced to each enemy in stages, which ramp up as the game goes on, and the map design is deceptively open, falsely leading players to believe that you can train this alien race and avoid attacks. But any Extinction player knows that this isn't the case, and to win, you must fight to survive. The formula for most of these maps is also established here, with players needing to destroy the hives in the surrounding area and then complete a main objective that can only be accessed once the hives are destroyed. To destroy each hive, players are equipped with a drill, and once placed down at a hive, the drill must be defended. If successful, you'll be rewarded with a skill point, which is a currency used to upgrade your character at any time. An additional skill point can also be earned if players complete the challenge given to them at each hive. These can vary from killing enemies with a specific weapon type, not spending any money on your extremely useful abilities, or finding and killing a black-spotted alien, just to name a few. These challenges snowball your character while also not being imperative to the experience, and you can easily fail a good majority of them and still make it out without a scratch. Back on topic of the drill, a game of Extinction ends if the drill is destroyed or if everyone dies. Thankfully, the drill can be repaired back to full health whenever it is damaged, but you'll need to be able to defend it while you're doing so. This is an extremely fun gameplay loop, with the game merging the best aspects of tower defense, horde shooters, action, and survival management genres. The mode also benefits from the drill needing to be ferried between hives, incentivizing someone to carry it. And every hive feels like an adventure, so let's talk about the foes that you'll come into contact with. I guess you could say it'll be a point of contact. Point of Contact introduces 5 cryptid types for players to face off against. First off, there's a Scout, an infantry type enemy that shows up right out of the gate and can down players in 10 to 12 hits. One of them is usually not a problem, but when in packs they can quickly overwhelm your forces if you aren't careful. Then there's the Hunter, which shows up in the first area as well once you completed a few hives. These enemies are bigger than their Scout counterparts and sport more health, higher damage, and can snare players upon contact, immediately telling you that training won't work here the same way that it worked in Zombies, which is such a distinct change that really hits you like a truck if you aren't prepared for it. Like, trust me, when I first played Extinction, that's how I thought the game worked, and I was very quickly proven wrong. Then there are the Seekers. These cryptids spawn out of meteors that careen down from the sky, and will rush up to you and explode when in close proximity, dealing a high amount of damage. Thankfully, these enemies have a low health pool and are relatively easy to deal with if prioritized, but they'll get the jump on any unsuspecting player. Once you've made it to the first barrier hive, after destroying all the hives in the area, you'll encounter a Scorpion, a hazard-spewing enemy that forces you to do more than just stand in place, with their projectiles exploding into large gas clouds that make it difficult to maneuver the area and revive teammates. And finally, there's the Rhino, which shows up in about the third area. As previously talked about in Beasts from Beyond, the Rhino sports the highest health of any cryptid on the map, rushes at players, and slams the ground for major damage, and is an absolute hazard who takes advantage of the tower defense gameplay, just like the Scorpion. While it might seem overwhelming, your gear is what allows you to stand toe-to-toe with these foes, and unlike World War II or Beasts from Beyond, which unfairly stack enemies of varying varieties on top of one another with different player-enemy interactions, the cryptids in Extinction are designed in such a way that they all interact with the player in the same destructive way, and their varying abilities and weaknesses complement each other rather than hinder, which is something Zombies has consistently struggled to work with, and is a key bonus as to why Extinction's hectic gameplay works. And trust me, this is a point about the gameplay that I cannot understate. Speaking of, every enemy in Extinction sports various weak points. By attacking these points, you'll deal increased damage and earn 1.5 as many points per kill, incentivizing skill while not overtly punishing players who don't quite have a handle on the system and the erratic and aggressive movements of the enemies. And Point of Contact is the perfect map to show off these weak points and how the AI of the game works. The town-like setting of Caldera Park provides the player with a great frame of reference for how cryptids move. In Extinction, every enemy exudes multi-directional movement. Some stick to walls, while others jump up on high places, and in some cases will charge directly at you. And because everything takes place in a small town, you have a relatively good idea of where the enemies will end up based on subconscious understanding of the terrain. The first map is perfect for training your brain, and it gets you used to how to combat the cryptids and predict their movements. Complete hats off to the developers. I love the way that this map is designed and the way that the enemies move around it. Then there are all the tools players can find to aid them on the map. There's turrets, traps, and the ability to call in an attack helicopter, and various propane tanks scattered about the area. Each of these various tools aren't as obvious in their use case as traps and other experiences are though. For example, in this game, traps don't completely block off a lane or an area like they do in Zombies. In Extinction, many of the traps take up a specific part of a lane or a route of access. For example, in the first area, you'll find that the electric trap that shocks the fence behind the drill. This fence doesn't encapsulate the whole area or even cover a lot of ground. Instead, it's just an additional tool that can take out a few additional cryptids, giving you less to manage for the time period that it is active. And that's what makes Extinction so much fun. These various tools and items aid you against the cryptid onslaught, but there are simply too many in most cases to deal with, and due to their erratic and unpredictable movement, the fence is perfect for dealing with cryptids who just happen to climb on the fence as their means to attack you. This gives you incredible player-enemy interactions, because again, you can't really snowball through with kill-all buttons in this game. Yes, there are items that work really well and are very effective against the cryptids, but nothing is exactly a kill-all. You'll be taking damage, you have to run, you have to hide, you have to use your different abilities. Everything in this game is so well and intricately designed. It's something that I think of with Black Ops 6. I'm going off script at this point. In Black Ops 6, that game has so many kill all buttons, delete all buttons, use this thing to get rid of every enemy on the map instantly. If you're in a corner, pop an Aether Shroud. If you need to get your armor back, pop a Frenzied Guard. If too many specialists are spawning in, use a Chopper Gunner and use a Mangler Injector. But in Extinction, you have powerful tools, but they're balanced in such a way that you still have to strategize how to use them and deal with what's coming at you. And finally, there's the scavenge system. A crucial part of Extinction gameplay is the downtime between waves, with each round of cryptids spawning in once you place down the drill. This creates an ebb and flow to the gameplay that is completely optional. In this downtime, you can scavenge the map for various pieces of trash and ammo boxes that you can interact with. These scavenge piles give you various rewards, including extra cash, additional ammo such as the variety of ammo types, the SoFlam equipment which basically just takes up a weapon slot, the trophy system which I honestly didn't use enough, various grenade types, the extremely useful Hypnoblade, which can turn enemies onto your side, the Flare, which is a glorified decoy that can just pull away just about any enemy away from the objective if they're in range, and you can find various pieces of intel. You are fully incentivized to do some digging, and some of the tools like the Flare and Hypno Knife are extremely useful when you're in a sticky situation. And if you have the applicable upgrade, you can even turn a Rhino, which is really cool. And honestly, I love the way the map plays, and with over 20 weapons at your disposal, there are plenty of different weapon combinations to try out, with each being, at worst, decently effective. But there are ones that dominate the rest, like the chainsaw found in the third area, which melt enemies when combined with Weapon Specialist. Now let's talk about the barrier hives, which must be destroyed to progress. After clearing a specific area, you'll need to destroy a barrier hive blocking your route to the bomb. The hive is too big to destroy with a drill, but you are aided by an attack helicopter which you must defend by killing scorpions that seek to shoot it down. This is relatively easy, and if you utilize the propane tanks, you can have each barrier hive down in less than a minute. Completing a barrier hive grants you 3,000 points and access to the next area. Fun fact, when entering new areas, you can see enemies like rhinos and hunters running about, giving you a glimpse as to what's coming next. But if you shoot at them, they'll begin to engage you, creating micro battles that can yield you extra money and experience. Once you've made it to the third area and completed the hives, you'll have access to arm the nuke and complete the exfil sequence. With 3 minutes on the clock, you must return to spawn, while being thwarted by cryptids at every chance, with meteors blocking the path multiple times. But if you made it this far, you most likely have the means to escape. It reminds me a lot of Dean Machine's ending, but the gameplay is much more engaging, with the map specifically trying to stop you and holding you at certain points with a glorified rush of enemies coming at you. This segment is a ton of fun, and even though you honestly can't fail as long as you don't die, you feel a real tension to escape. But who knows, maybe I'm just getting way too much into it. Once you arrive at the exfil point, you immediately zoom away, with the nuke essentially going off right in your face. I have no idea how you survive, if you survive, but you know what, hey, I needed a suntan anyways. And that's Point of Contact. As I said in the beginning, the experience is extremely simple, and the map introduces you to the world of the cryptids. But what about all those little things? Fun fact, just like the Frozen Dawn, you can completely walk off the map and into the crater. If you fail to place the drill down after 5 minutes, you'll be indefinitely swarmed by various cryptids, and in hard mode, you'll be completely swarmed by rhinos, which I don't think I need to tell you is basically a death sentence. And that's it! There's really not a whole lot to talk about. Point of Contact is a solid experience and perfectly sets up the mode of Extinction. But where can we go from here? Well, let's head north and learn more about this otherworldly threat in Nightfall.
Nicely done, Spectre 1. Now let's find out what caused the scourge.
Coming off of the heels of Point of Contact, Nightfall is the perfect sequel, pushing the envelope with a more dynamic location, boss fight, enemies, and introducing the game's first and most iconic wonder weapon, the Venom X. The experience also includes an expanded narrative and varying elevations and terrain that give both you and the enemy more tools to play around with. But first, what's the story? No longer playing as Spectre 1, we now continue our adventures as a member of the SIF team, who, despite the narrative change, offer us no unique dialogue or character interactions. And just like Cold War, Vanguard, and MWZ, we play as a set of operators, but who observe and listen to the other named characters, such as their leader, Godfather, the paleolinguistic Samantha Cross, and the villainous David Archer. You know, the guy whose name you can spell in Shall and Shuffle. Honestly, it's kind of funny how ahead of its time Extinction was. Following the events of Point of Contact, Captain Archer has smuggled cryptid samples to North Alaska, where he is planning on uncovering the secrets of these creatures, even creating his own through his own research, which he dubs the Breeder. Samantha Cross is brought on against her will, and Archer has her going to work decrypting an obelisk, an ancient device found underground after the events of Point of Contact. It is said this device has instructions that will lead Archer and his team toward a building known as the Ark. As now that the cryptid race has been awakened, it's only a matter of time until they take over the world. This story is interesting, but just like criticism that Cold War's narrative has, much of this information is only given to you in intel. And unlike Cold War, which at least gleams the most important information to the player, Nightfall does practically none of that, leaving a ton of blanks in the story that can only be solved if you listen to the intel. This isn't a terrible decision, as it incentivizes you to learn the story, but you also teach players none of this information, which can leave the in-map experience feeling bland. Because if you don't collect the intel, all that you learn is that you need to save Samantha Cross. Samantha Cross is kidnapped by David Archer, this random guy with the sharpshooter skills of a sniper. Seriously, my guy shot a gun out of her hand and didn't even flinch. And the two are now aboard a ship with another batch of cryptids with an even greater monster lying beneath the surface. I like the idea of Extinction's narrative on paper. If anything, unlike IW's story, Extinction commits to its tone-deaf action-adventure theming, evolving the stakes with each preceding map, getting crazier and crazier. I think where it falls on its face is making each of these set pieces and story beats interweave into one coherent narrative. And sure, the intel system is supposed to help mitigate that flaw, but if you actually look at each map at face value, you really can't gather enough information for it to make any real sense. But we'll talk about that more in the preceding maps. Then there's the intel itself. This is where the real meat and potatoes of the narrative is presented to players. These bits of lore take the form of radios, which can be viewed in the game's menu once collected. These audio logs seek to fill out the world of Extinction. It introduces and gives us further details as to what the cryptids are, who David Archer is, what he found in Colorado, and how the outbreak at the Nightfall facility even happened in the first place, with this being done by Samantha Cross, who purposely released the cryptids onto the base in an attempt to kill Archer and his men. We're unsure as to reasons why she does this, and why the cryptids haven't killed her either, with Cross hardly remembering the event. You know, years later, it's crazy the parallels this map would have with Firebase C, specifically with both Samantha-like characters unleashing hordes of monsters onto a research facility that they were held at, and forgetting both events, in a DLC 1. Cause if I had a nickel for every time that happened, I'd have two. We also learned that in the intel that the Breeder was Archer's creation, and that Samantha Cross has worked tirelessly to uncover the secrets of the obelisk Archer found with the information not currently shared with us. Overall, the story of Nightfall is serviceable, but the next couple of maps will need to do some heavy lifting in order for the story to work. Then there's the map design and gameplay. Nightfall features a more complex level layout featuring varying levels of elevation for both you and the AI to take advantage of, or at least try to. I wouldn't say that this elevation is more useful than standard terrain, but it does involve more intricate and dynamic hive encounters. This is especially true once you're inside the research facility, which is basically Scorpion Hell, making them a top priority to take down due to your limited movement. There are now encounters where the cryptids are above you, below you, and all around you, with the map slowly closing in the playable space and opening up the enemies as you make your way through the facility. And it's this natural increase in difficulty and level geometry that makes the map a blast to play through. Then there's new features. Should players find a locker key, they'll find fully kitted out weapons that greatly benefit player killing potential. While it is RNG to find these keys, you can spend teeth to have one in your beginning loadout. These weapons pack quite a punch, and with some of the new enemies on this map, you're going to need it. Being a combination between the Hunter's speed and the Rhino's damage, the Phantom is a deadly assassin who makes its way onto the battlefield. The Phantom can teleport out of thin air, deal high amounts of damage, and retreat if necessary. Alongside the Rhino, the Phantom makes for another high-value target that perfectly contrasts the Rhino's slow hulking frame. What's cool is the way the map has you encounter these enemies, which slowly appear from shipping containers as you progress through the map, like the Rhino showing up once you've accessed the second area. Lanes in Nightfall are quite linear, and Rhinos take advantage of this design at every turn, especially in the second area, which features a long strip of land, perfect for them to run into you. To combat these foes, players can find and equip the Venom X, a wonder weapon created using the DNA of the cryptids. This grenade launcher behemoth produces a large explosion upon detonation, which further evolves into a green gas cloud lethal to the cryptid kind. Unlike other weapons in the game, the Venom has limited premium ammunition, which can only be reloaded by randomly obtaining cryptid egg sacs by killing enemies. The Venom is super unique, especially in a franchise with such a high variety of one-of-a-kind and powerful special weapons, and if you get your hands on it, it's easy to see why. It's also accessible to all players, making it a progressive tool in your arsenal, something that the developers account for in the third and final area in the map. And trust me, you'll feel that difficulty spike once you obtain the wonder weapon. And it's super cool to see a co-op mode developer commit to giving players the wonder weapon and trying to balance difficulty around that. And it's a philosophy that shines through the later half of Nightfall, because honestly, if they did this throughout the entirety of Zombies, it wouldn't be fun, so it just ends up being something that makes Extinction feel so unique. You're constantly bombarded from all angles, with scorpions just out of reach, having your attention pulled away by high damage threats like the Phantom and the Rhino, and if you aren't careful, the remaining hunters and scouts will pick off you and destroy the drill. All of these elements come together perfectly and make for some exhilarating gameplay. But now that we've talked about most of the map's features, let's talk about its best one, the boss fight. Nightfall is not only a revolutionary Extinction map, but also the first one of the COD co-op modes to introduce a boss fight. The breeder is encountered multiple times throughout the map, with 2 of them being boss fights. Being first introduced right as you spawn in, the breeder immediately sets the tone for the experience. And when you see it, you just think that the breeder is nothing but a fake teaser for a big scary monster that you never fight. But upon completion of the first zone, you are forced to actually come face to face with it. Sporting large weaponized turrets on its back, the ability to summon reinforcements, and deadly gas clouds similar to the Scorpion, the breeder demands your attention on the battlefield. And for being the first boss fight in the series, the map does a much better job getting you acquainted to its mechanics and nuances than say something like the DE Keeper, or a fight with much greater simplicity like the Sense Oz fight. And because both boss fights happen naturally in gameplay, you don't have to complete some insane Easter egg to actually attempt them, evening the player field for anyone playing the map. Once defeated at the end of the first area, the beast reappears at the end of the map for a proper boss fight sequence. Sporting powerful melee swings, a designated weak point, stun sequences, and health regeneration pods, the fight has you work for your victory, on top of the already mounting enemy offense. What helps is that every time you defeat one of the breeder's 3 health regeneration pods, you'll receive 400 points, perfect for making back your money in a fight where cash is hard to come by. And because of the previous fight, you'll have the knowledge to avoid some of the breeder's deadliest attacks, like the turret volley. Wow, who would have thought? Good game design makes your game good! Once enough damage has been applied to the face, the breeder will become stunned and reveal a weak point in the stomach, which will deal major damage if destroyed. Once enough damage has been dealt, you'll move on to an intermission phase, where you'll have to fight the usual rhinos, scorpions, phantoms, hunters, seekers, and scouts before the breeder returns. The second phase of the fight is much of the same, so it's up to you and your team to repeat your strategies and achieve victory. This fight covers all of its bases perfectly, and combined with the limited resources and the enemy player cash balance, this fight can get out of hand quite quickly, even for experienced players. But that makes it all the more satisfying when you finally slay this titan. I think what I like is that even if it's the first of its kind, it doesn't feel like the developers have used that as an excuse to make it too simple, or that it didn't age well. The core mechanics of Extinction and the boss mechanics work in a way that feel rewarding to learn and still challenging to play through, even though you know what to expect. It's this really cool enemy-player dichotomy that actually makes it fun and challenging to beat the breeder. Once defeated, you'll receive an outro cutscene where we learn that Archer has kidnapped Samantha Cross and has begun testing on her on a large vessel in the middle of the Arctic Ocean. Having led an assault by land, the cryptids now continue their invasion by sea, and it's only a matter of time before they conquer the whole planet. And wow, what an experience! From the gameplay, to the progression, to how the map changes and adds nuance to level design, Nightfall is a premium co-op experience any zombies player should have in their catalog. Then there's the small details. Only in the boss fight of Nightfall, the rhinos gain an extra ability where they can spin dash into players like Sonic the Hedgehog. And honestly, it's terrifying every time that it happens. In the map's intro, you can scavenge supplies off of this dead soldier. In addition to that, the Maverick he leaves behind disappears for some reason after the first breeder encounter. The various gas tanks that are on the map can be blown up for extra damage, even though they're rarely placed in spaces that you'll get any use out of them. But that's Nightfall, the best experience Extinction has to offer, and this is for a myriad of reasons. The enemy selection is difficult, but balanced, with the Venom X being the perfect wonder weapon to tip the scales. The breeder boss fight is one of a kind, and it would take quite a while for zombies to catch up to its level of quality. The map design evolves from the previous experience, and it isn't afraid to pull punches, forcing you and your team to develop new strategies that take as much advantage of the map design as the enemies do. And then there's the story, which is a step up from Point of Contact, but in terms of map lore, we don't exactly get a whole lot, feeling like we learned the bare minimum. And that's Nightfall. But where does the story take us next? Well, put on your rain jackets as we make our way to the far reaches of the ocean to explore what happens in Mayday.
Archer won't get far. There's nothing out there but 600 miles of thin ice.
Mayday is the third map in our Extinction adventure. Taking place on the Stormbreaker a month after the events of Nightfall, it's up to Sif 1 to recover Samantha Cross from the clutches of David Archer. Again, the facility, much like Nightfall, has been completely overrun by both cryptids created and stowed on board, and those brought about by the Kraken. Mayday also features elemental Venom X variants, a crafting system, and new cryptid variants to have combat with. On paper, Mayday should be just as engaging as Nightfall, but falls apart due to some of the less than stellar gameplay decisions. So let's set sail and get right into it. Just like Nightfall, the narrative experience of this map is extremely light. Players need to push their way through the facility, fail to locate Archer, fail to retrieve Samantha, and defeat the Kraken. There's very little substance besides the intro cutscene, which leaves us with more questions than answers. Having made his way to a second cryptid colony, Archer is stopped by visions of Samantha Cross, who seemingly has power she's not letting on. She shows Archer a vision of Earth's inevitable future now that the cryptids have awakened. He is then awoken from his vision and from his subsequent dream sequence where his ship is being attacked by the Kraken, and the cutscene ends on the beast laying havoc on anything that it comes into contact with. Currently, we don't know Samantha's true intentions, what's controlling her, if anything is, and what's attracting the cryptids. Mayday takes players through the ship where they'll encounter tight corridors, large spaces, and a few shakeups in the mechanics and map progression. Two of the biggest being the doors and the buildable mechanics. The doors propose small challenges to players that grant them additional encounters with the cryptids. These encounters don't grant players skill points, but depending on the door, you'll be rewarded with weapons, additional lockers, intel scavenge boxes, and buildable containers. Many of these doors aren't required for progression, and are purely optional, granting you more choices, extending playtime, and giving you rewards should you seek them out. And in Mayday, you're going to need them. I really enjoy the way that this mechanic is implemented onto the map. This progression naturally fits into the way that you, the player, grow with the experience. Unlike normal zombies, the first two Extinction maps feature wide open spaces. In Point of Contact, you have 3 sprawling zones to work through, with progression being split between each hive, and this changes based on the order that you go in. The same is true in Mayday, but the doors provide you with additional options to progress your character, trimming the fat if you want to avoid them, but adding more content if you actually go for them. Due to Extinction's linear nature, this is a great way to shake up the formula, and it's a shame the feature doesn't come back in the 2 preceding maps. And then there's the buildable mechanic. Unlike the quest-based buildables of old, Extinction streamlines the process with one simple change, making the buildable pieces change based on what buildable you wish to build. Buildable parts can be found inside of red toolboxes found scattered about the map, behind doors, and during progression. Depending on the buildable schematic you collect, you will need to open 3 of these toolboxes, which then change what's in them to grant you the buildable that you need, rather than knowing specific part locations like you would in Transit, Buried, Mob of the Dead, Die Rise, Origins, or any map going forward. This allows the developers to create a ton of buildables without spending resources scattering parts everywhere, which also incentivizes a limited number of these resources. Schematics include pipe bombs, sticky flares, the elemental Venom X's, the Hypno Trap, and the Tesla Trap. Each of these tools benefit the players differently, with the most useful being the sticky flares, and of course, the buildable Venom X, which is basically required if you want to survive. Speaking of the Venoms, this time around, there are 3 additional variants that are added. These can be obtained by collecting a specific color of Biolum from your red toolbox. The variants include the original Venom X from Nightfall, the Venom FX, which is a fire-infused venom that produces fireballs of death, the Venom LX, which is a lightning variant that produces balls of lightning like the upgraded lightning staff, and finally there's the Venom SX, which produces cryptid sentry turrets that are weak on their own but effective in numbers. Personally, the elemental variant concept is completely wasted here. As far as I can tell, the fire and lightning venoms produce near identical effects to the original, with the SX being the only one to do something different. And it doesn't help that the SX is outright terrible, with simply sentry turrets being 10 times more effective and have full game availability, as well as upgrades, which allow you to place down a second turret. So you're basically rolling for a 3/4 chance to avoid the SX, and the other 3 are practically identical. And of course, for some reason, the SX just shows up more out of any of the other biolums, because of course it does. Then there's the map's enemies. Starting off, we have the Cedar. In place of the scorpions, cedars are yellow, tanky, seeker-like enemies that produce deadly gas clouds, and cryptid sentry turrets that, just like the SX, don't do much all by themselves, but in groups stack up with the other enemies very quickly. It also doesn't help that the cedar is quite tanky for its short size and damage potential. And then there's just the awkward hitboxes on the sentry turrets too. These make the foes quite annoying to deal with. On the ship's upper deck, the threat these enemies provide begins to stack higher and higher, and by the boss fight, they become completely insufferable. They make the map a chore to play through, and in the map's final area, they become infuriating as they take complete advantage of the area's design, forcing a massive increase in difficulty that becomes a mess by the end of it. Look one way, cedar turrets. Look the other way, also cedar turrets. Even with Weapon Specialist, it's almost shocking how overwhelming that they are, especially in co-op, when the game just begins to cycle through cedars one after the other. Like, here's the thing. I get it's supposed to be difficult, it does provide a difficulty increase into the map of Mayday, but it does start bordering on just being plain annoying. And yeah, they give you nearly 2,000 points whenever you kill one of them. That's great. I don't know, I just find them annoying to deal with. They're one of the only enemies in Extinction that don't really mesh well with the other enemy types, but thankfully they only show up on this one map, so they're not the biggest issue, and I do complain about them, but realistically, they do provide some level of semblance of challenge, but like not the right kind of challenge, if that makes sense. And finally, there's the map's boss, the Kraken. You know, the enemy from the custom map Leviathan. The Kraken sports large tentacles, produces red toxic mist like the Breeder, and shoots an EMP shockwave in between phases. To defeat the unused Voyage of Despair boss fight, you'll need to wait until the beast reveals a weak point on its head, and then fire away using your various weapons, and the AA guns which can be found on the sides of the vessel. You will be attacked while using these cannons, so make sure you're prepared if you plan on using them. Who knows, maybe this will even be the boss fight on the new Terminus map. Okay, so I've been writing the script since June 2024, and hey, apparently the obvious prediction was correct. Along the way, you'll be swarmed by cryptids, including but not limited to one of the many cedars. I swear, I'm just about ready to eat these things alive if I have to. I'm mixed on this boss fight. Unlike the Breeder encounter in Nightfall, the unused Terminus boss fight encounter is a mix of blunders and failures that don't make the boss fight flow as smoothly, and a primary factor to this is how the map design and obstacles are used. In Nightfall, the arena is a wide open space. Players are given a ton of flexibility with how they approach the Breeder, and many of the Breeder's attacks incentivize constant movement, especially as the Rhinos and Phantoms join the fight. It highlights defensive and offensive playstyles, and the terrain offers cover for some of the Breeder's deadliest attacks without being a hindrance to your offensive playstyle. To add to my example, think of the pillars in the DE boss fight. While these items are used as defensive shields against the Keeper's Screen Wipe ability, their position is placed in the center of the arena, and they hardly take up any space, giving players using the outer circle the right maneuverability to avoid some of the Keeper's deadliest attacks, like the Seeking Skulls, while maintaining distance from the undead and making the inner circle much more difficult to utilize. In the Mayday boss fight, you have these massive crates in an already small arena, making maneuverability lower than it's ever been. This is now stacked on top of constantly spawning cedars and a boss whose attacks cover the whole arena. I find this is where the Kraken falls apart, and if you aren't always on the offensive, the cedars will quickly overpower you. And sadly, difficult isn't the word I use to describe the boss, it's just kind of tedious and really annoying. Okay, so let me just recap what past me is talking about the boss fight arena. I do think it is fun. I think the problem with the boss fight in Mayday is that it don't really make you take advantage of the space in a whole lot of unique ways. Like, obviously you have the AA guns on the four corners, but I don't think the boss fight gives you a good enough reason to use the rest of the space besides the corners and the center. I felt like all the way back in Nightfall, you had a better opportunity to use the whole arena to run around, stop regeneration pods, get good vantage points on the boss. Whereas in Mayday, the boss simply only stands on one of the two sides of the arena, and most of the time in co-op, you're basically confined to just sitting in the middle because you want to avoid the tentacles because the tentacles have specific spots where they try and hit you, and then the rest of the arena is kind of void space, and the cargo containers don't really do a whole lot to add to the boss fight besides you avoiding the EMP attack, and it feels like the boss fight is just really underbaked for what it's trying to do. And overall, Mayday's boss fight is not my favorite in the entire game. There's only two, so it's just gonna be the one I like less, but I just don't think it's very well designed compared to how really good the Breeder fight is in Nightfall. But anyways, back to the video. But once the Kraken is felled, you will have achieved victory. The Kraken is a step down from the Breeder in terms of overall consistency, but still an amazing boss fight that takes good advantage of spectacle, but definitely hasn't aged as well as its previous counterpart. It's also a shame this is the last dedicated actual boss encounter the game has. Following the enemies, the map also features multiple dynamic encounters that attempt to shake up the gameplay. Just like Nightfall, players will encounter the Kraken at a fourth of the way through the match, and must defeat its tentacle to achieve victory. This encounter is no breeder, and it also doesn't help that the tentacle has no range attacks to speak of, so defending the drill is as easy as sticking to the back of the wall and watching it flail about. Then there's the drill encounter halfway through the map. Players are forced to defend the drill from an outpost while the drill destroys a pod in an inaccessible area. If the drill is damaged, you'll be unable to repair it, making teamwork and defending the drill a priority. Thankfully, you earn the ability to craft the venoms just before this, but be careless and things can go sideways very fast. I personally love how this encounter forces you to approach the drill defense differently, especially when you consider most of your equipment and score streaks aren't able to help you in this situation. Also, as I'm writing this script, I should note for a good portion of this map, the Trinity rocket is completely useless because of most of it takes place inside. This is also where the story takes a turn, as Archer informs us that the only way he'll help us is if we kill Samantha Cross, with Cross now being labeled a high-value target. Then there's the map's biggest shakeup. Following the halfway point of the map, players are only able to earn half as many points per kill as usual. This is meant to make the experience more difficult, but if you ask me, is one of the blunders that the map makes. Almost like playing with a relic, but one that persists through the second half of the map until the boss fight. The cash restriction is meant to make the enemies less valuable and put a greater restriction on your equipment, while also allowing the game to spawn in more enemies. This just ends up making combat feel less rewarding, while also increasing enemy density, and this happens for the entire second half of the map as well. Then there's the chlorine encounter. In order to cooperate with Archer, Sif 1 is instructed to fill the room Samantha is being held in with chlorine gas, with the valves being attacked by cryptids. The valves themselves aren't repairable, and if destroyed will cover a fourth of the arena in chlorine gas, making it uninhabitable. This encounter requires players to defend multiple objectives, and is made even more difficult by the cash earned being halved as well. One of my favorite parts about this section is the yelling between teammates as those above pass down supplies to those below, and vice versa. Overall, each of these encounters shake up the gameplay in a unique way, but don't do enough to leave a memorable impression, but that might have something to do with Extinction's base gameplay being difficult to build off of, which is something that I noticed the developers struggled with as we go on. The mode has a great foundation, if not one of the best in the series. The scale is incredibly impressive, and you can see each map attempt to evolve from the previous one. But while reviewing the game, I noticed Mayday was the first experience where we begin to see the cracks in the game's basic loop. And this can be due to the cedars, the half cache in the second half of the map, and one of the map's biggest offenders being simply the length. Mayday is a long experience, clocking in at roughly about an hour and 10 minutes, compared to the 50 minutes for Nightfall and the 40 for Point of Contact. And I find the extra 20 minutes placed on the research facility on the top deck to be the main culprit. By the time you reach this portion of the map, I find that my brain is kinda clocked out at this point. That isn't due to needing constant stimulation, far from it, the map provides plenty, but this is due to the map presenting some of the flaws in the gameplay loop of Extinction. With Mayday, in my opinion, showcasing how far a normal game of Extinction can go before it feels repetitive and or exhaustive. Let me explain. Most casual zombies experiences reach the height of their difficulty and complexity at around the 1 to 2 hour mark, depending on the game, with some cases like World at War and Black Ops 1 reaching their max difficulties in the 20s. In Mayday's case, the map reaches its max difficulty fairly quickly at around the 30-minute mark, once the Rhino is introduced, with the intensity staying at that level until the end of the match. Unlike maps like Origins, which feature the Panzer once every 3 rounds, and the gameplay loop having ebbs and flows between those Panzer periods. But if you ask me, the gameplay loop of Mayday does become somewhat exhausting, and with the last 20 or so minutes just being that level of intensity, almost like level 10 plus Outbreak from Cold War or the Unstable River from MWZ. Difficulty, intensity of the combat, and length are all factors to consider in these co-op modes, and I find Mayday to be one of the many that goes too far in that specific direction. Because, for example, you have this idea that unlike normal zombies, Extinction puts you on this exact linear pathway. There's not many things to do to divert your time or your attention. You're just constantly battling high power enemy threat, high power enemy threat, high power enemy threat. And it does kind of become grating, as fun as it can be. I just don't think enough is done to really give each combat scenario much nuance, despite some of the ones that I listed earlier. The main problem is, it's just high power threat, high power threat, high power threat, but this time you can't repair the drill. Now granted, in my entire analysis, the doors are being taken into consideration, which in some cases are purely optional content and are meant to give players more resources should they go out of their way to find them. Because fun fact, there are only 10 hives on the entirety of Mayday, much less than any other previous map. But if you include the 10 hives, the 3 doors on the lower deck, and the chlorine instance, you're still left with a ton of content. And due to Extinction's linear nature, it all has to be played through every single time, which highlights an advantage that Zombies has over it. Now, in counter to this argument, that is exactly what the optional doors are for, but for how difficult the map is in the second half due to the half cache, you cannot pass up on any opportunities for venoms or extra resources, which go from optional to, you might as well do them. So with all that said, I personally find Mayday to be a rather difficult mess that evolves from where Nightfall left off, but leaves in its wake some poor gameplay decisions that bring the experience down compared to its counterparts. And sadly, a lot of my criticisms will carry on going forward. Then there's all those little things that I actually do enjoy, like the turrets in the boss fight being an effective counter, and actually usable, unlike most turrets in the series. The fact that you can climb on top of these crates on the upper deck, jump out of bounds, and the game doesn't immediately kill you is a nice touch. Many of the traps are extremely effective on this map, and make playing Engineer more useful than ever, especially when they can stack more cash than any other class type, making them more effective when the game's cash earn rates get cut in half. I love the way the cryptids climb onto the wires in the upper deck, that's a nice touch. Most games would simply have them bounce on top of the wire, so making them climb underneath them is really cool. You can craft additional Venom variants and change which element you're using mid-match should you not be happy with the one that you're currently using, by crafting a Venom with a different elemental biome. I love how one of the Venom parts you retrieve from the toolbox is a deactivated Venom X, but in gameplay it's represented by a tiny little ammo clip. I love that you actually board the ship from a tiny transport vessel. The team could have easily spawned the player into the map with the boat model behind them, signifying that you traveled on it. But they went the extra effort and created a small sequence where you spawn in as the boat is arriving at the vessel, giving you immediate context for the size of the Stormbreaker and where you're entering it from. This is done a million times better than say something like USS Mount Olympus or Carrier, that's for sure. I also love how each optional door encounter forces you to fight a different enemy in an isolated scenario, with the door by the docking bay spawning in Seekers, the door before the first Kraken encounter spawning in a Phantom, and the door after the first Kraken encounter spawning in a Rhino, which is always a cool way to get players caught up to speed on the various different enemies the mode has. And finally, there's the Kraken's design. I love this thing, and it perfectly fits the evolution of these monsters as we continue our adventure. Mayday is a confusing entry in Extinction. It's hard carried by the game's core gameplay design, dynamic level flow, and enemies, but it is hampered by a lengthy, high-octane level progression, and the wonder weapons it brings to the table range from underwhelming to just flat out terrible. Hey y'all, Editing Stanley here. While editing the video, I also found some really cool things in the intel that I wanted to bring up. While I do chastise it for being important to the main narrative, I do think some of it is really good. There's some intel that come from Archer, and he talks about old stories and how the game uses it to allude to future enemies. For example, he talks about how the Native Americans first saw the conquistadors and they were riding horses, considering the horses to be the demons, not the people riding them, and it causes them to go into an introspective look at what could be controlling the cryptids. Like, I love the way that he postulates how their formations attack Spectre 1 in Point of Contact, and it's really cool to see how the game tries to tease future enemies using the understandings of previous maps and the way that the enemies work, while also tying it into real-world history. It's really cool. What's also really cool is the way that they tie in real-world history into the Medusa device, which is seen at the end of the game. Archer makes a comparison to Medusa and how her head was used as the ultimate weapon, so he's trying to discover a means to defeat the cryptids, assuming that they're going to take over Earth and that there's no way to stop them. And again, I really do like this, and the way that the narrative actually leads into the next map, with cool intrigues, using history, and different insights to actually give you more of this world. It's really cool, and it reminds me a lot of what Cold War does right with its intel system. There's just a lot less in Extinction, so it makes it a lot easier to follow minor details. But anyways, that's Mayday, a map that I consider to be a mixed bag in the Extinction catalog. While it does have some really cool features and unique ways to shake up the gameplay, I'll be honest, it doesn't really feel like there's much more that they can do to experiment with the playstyle of the cryptids without completely overhauling the game. I think the Venom variants are really cool, but 3 out of the 4 of them basically feel like the exact same thing, and one of them's a Cedar variant, which is terrible. I think the Kraken is a really cool boss, but I don't think the game takes enough of an advantage of it, nor does anything unique with it to make the gameplay feel different at the end of the map. And at the end of the day, the map just feels long, a bit sluggish, and the cedars are not helping. But that's the map. While I do think things can be improved upon, even if it is a low point in my opinion for Extinction, it's still a really fun experience. And a lot of my criticisms towards it are really just things that I'm trying to say aren't the best in the game, but they're not the worst thing ever. This is not like Beasts from Beyond or Terra Maldicta or any other bottom tier map. And Mayday just represents a low point in this really strong entry. But having now landed near Baal's Pyramid, it's up to Sif 1 to infiltrate an even larger cryptid colony, take the fight to their masters, and do whatever is necessary to win the war for planet Earth. The story continues in Awakening.
This isn't over yet.
Awakening is the fourth map in our cryptid slaying adventure. Having finally located the pyramids hinted to us in the obelisk, it's now up to Sif 1 to find Archer, Samantha Cross, and uncover what's happening here. Awakening is another step up for the mode, and includes optional side path, Easter eggs, and upgrades for players to explore. The map is easily the most breathtaking out of the bunch, and is the one just about anyone thinks of whenever you're mentioning Extinction as a mode. Personally, Awakening ranks in a similar position to me as Mayday. It's a map with a ton of cool ideas, scenarios, and game-changing events, but makes decisions that bring down the experience, and the map simply doesn't flow as well as the first two, but let's talk about it. Awakening starts out with Archer and his men finally in Baal's Pyramid following his premonition in the Mayday intro. Having slowly lost the fight on his way to the Ancestor Ark, Archer is met by Cross, who severs his right arm that is infected, and asks to make a deal with him. It's cryptic, confusing, and stuff like the cryptids being able to infect humans and their flesh simply never comes back up again, like Misty's zombie wound in Barry just never being a thing that was ever extrapolated on. But once inside, you were to take a scanner into the cryptid caves and this time scan their obelisk, disable their gateways, and find Archer locked away within the Ancestor Pyramid. The story is again pretty simple, but we do actually learn something substantial in the intel. Included are even IGCs that walk us through what happens to Cross and Archer. Leading his men through the site, the team make their way to the Ancestor Chamber, where they kill a sleeping ancestor and take the spinal cord off its head, crafting a device known as the Medusa. Samantha Cross then uses her powers to force Archer to kill his men before leaving him incapacitated by his own bullets and to die at the hands of the crumbling Ark later. The map also reveals one important distinction about the cryptids. These are an ancient race of sentient creatures that have long existed on Earth, and their label as aliens is simply incorrect. Which, granted, is obvious as we talked about in the previous maps, but part of what made the game interesting, especially if you don't really know the intel or look any deeper, is that it does feel like it's just aliens invading Earth. So if you actually pay attention to the narrative, the revelation is pretty cool, if not obvious. Now the ancestors at Baal's Pyramid are sending out a signal to reawaken the other arcs, and soon the world will know Extinction. Honestly, this is my favorite narrative out of the 4 maps so far, and it's nice to finally get some answers and conclusions on a few of the game's story beats. The cryptids are a lot more than just some alien race of bug monsters, and the ancestor reveal keeps the situation dynamic and evolving. And as stated in my IW re-review, but what makes this narrative interesting is that humanity loses in the end, but we'll get to that once we cover Exodus. It also states that throughout history, the ancestors have used humans as their avatars, and seemingly Samantha Cross has now been chosen as their most recent, and would explain her sudden abilities and telekinesis as the events unfold. Then there's the gameplay. Initially, the map plays quite similar to Point of Contact. Actually, now that I think about it, it's a near one-to-one of the gameplay loop. Scan obelisks instead of destroy hives, open lock gateways instead of barrier hives, repeat 2 more times, then survive a final sequence, and exfil. What works about Awakening is the presentation through which most of this is done despite the similar task, and I love the set dressing of the underground cryptid colony. An environment to this scale wouldn't really be attempted again until the Dark Ether in Cold War, but I really want to give props to the world that it tries to create, and the developers went all out making it feel distinct and otherworldly. The visuals are clearly the standout aspect of the map, and what the map specifically pushes the envelope on. As you progress through each area, you can find additional side paths that lead you into more difficult encounters. These can be interacted with as soon as you load in, and can spawn various enemies including rhinos, hunters, phantoms, and even mammoths. These evolved behemoths are the final standard cryptid, and are an evolved version of the rhino. They sport more health, deal greater damage, can burrow underground to temporarily avoid attacks, and can summon additional hunters by slamming on the ground. This enemy is a ton of fun to fight, and I love its unique abilities compared to other enemies in the game. Also, it doesn't spew blue unavoidable flames, which is also a nice touch. In order to combat with these beasts and the greater enemy hordes, players can find the coveted arc attachment, which is a special gun muzzle that basically pack-punches your weapon, giving it greater damage and causing it to fire blue tracer rounds. These can be found across the map, and should you explore every side path, you should find enough for the full team. The arc attachment can only be found naturally on this map, and it makes sense why. Also showing up on the map are the gargoyles and the dive bombers. Now taking to the skies, the dive bombers are explosive pest-style enemies that explode on contact, but gargoyles are a whole nother beast entirely. They have large health pools, range needle barrages, and can fly high into the sky. These creatures are demons, and demand you pay attention to them as they will murder you on sight. When defeated, they give you 1,750 points, and are a great cash infusion should you be short on resources. Every enemy on Awakening can appear in the first area due to the side paths spawning both mammoths and rhinos as early as minute 1, so it's best to enter this map if you're prepared. Once every obelisk has been scanned, you can now use a vulture drone to destroy them and unlock the barrier forward. This section is a drag, kind of basically making you the attack chopper in the same way that like with the barrier hives and point of contact, you have to use the drone to break them, and then your teammates are the one defending you from the alien, but it's just kind of finicky, it doesn't really work. And you're supposed to blow up these obelisks, but it's just kind of boring, and most of the time you can simply maneuver out of the way of most of the attacks, leaving your teammates to just sit there and do nothing while you wait. There's nothing really incentivizing you or pushing you forward to defend these drones either, because if they get destroyed, then you can just wait a second, reactivate the computer, and get another drone. It's just kind of a boring section, and it feels a bit redundant. Thankfully, this only needs to be accomplished 2 times, but they're 2 relatively boring sections. Things also to account for are the bouncing mushrooms that launch you high into the sky, and the fact that you can just walk yourself off a cliff and immediately die, which is always fun.
Really sure was a teleport, never been to the land of shining for. Bloopers the world of a bazillion G's. No matter where we go, we always party with a zombie. Hobo, I was jumping penthouse, chilling, I didn't want to mix with zombie killing. Fantasies that don't carry off in the boom tank, don't forget, it's checking the thing. Really quick, turn on the power, the food is coming to power.
The Venom X schematic can be unceremoniously found in one of the many side paths, and crafting them is as easy as it was on Mayday. I will say though, if you don't know about the secret paths or where they're all hidden, you'll spend a good amount of time looking for them. There's some really cool secret spots for them, and you have to find them as they offer the best rewards, which despite their optional nature, does make them feel somewhat required, but again, that's up to you what you consider a requirement for gameplay. Then I want to talk about the cryptids. Being on their home turf, my only complaint with the level design and map design is that the cryptids themselves hardly get to take advantage of it, besides maybe the gargoyle who can fly. Many of the areas are accessible by both parties, and while the arena and location is esoteric, not enough is done to truly make it feel like the cryptids have an upper hand on you, since you're battling them on their home soil, which felt like a missed opportunity, but not a complaint that'll make or break the map. Like, as the map goes on, areas feel less and less restrictive, and eventually it all just becomes a bunch of flat land that really isn't any different than how you fight the cryptids on other maps. Also, it doesn't help enemies like the gargoyles just get stuck in ceiling geometry in the second area. Speaking of, there's the map's grand finale. Once you enter the Ark, you can find Archer who's been left to die. With him is a device called the Cortex, which is the key to defeating the cryptids, supposedly. With it, they might be able to turn the tide of the battle, but to retrieve it, they must charge it up too. Doing this seemingly begins to thaw the ancestors out of their cryosleep faster. Now the race is on to charge the Cortex using the power of the Ark, with the Cortex periodically going off to demonstrate its power. This sequence has players fight most cryptids on the map, and is pretty easy all things considered. I love the look of the Ark, but my only complaint is how empty the main structure looks. But I suppose at the end of the day, it is just a refrigerator for the ancestors. I also love the effect that they use to show how many ancestors are truly resting in the Ark. And don't even get me started on the thematics during the final section, I love them. As it goes on, the Ark begins attacking players with electricity, and the yellow smoke begins to fill the arena. Once the Cortex is fully charged, you can retrieve and escape, leaving Archer to die a grim fate as the entire colony begins to collapse. Good riddance! The exfil sequence plays out nearly identical to the point of contact one, except you need to activate and charge the Cortex to push through each barrier gate. Once back at the beginning of the map, it all comes to a close. The cutscene shows Earth being completely overrun by cryptids, and no matter how many nukes or orbital strikes it takes, they just keep coming. The world is now facing an extinction, and just like the ancestors before them, humanity is constructing their own ark, and thus the final hour is near. Samantha Cross is also spotted on Ball's Pyramid, and she is airlifted back to LA. And the final shot is the ancestors preparing to attack humanity's final bastion.
The ancestors survived the last apocalypse in arks hidden under our feet. But we've got an ark of our own, hanging right over their heads.
Then there's all those little things. I love the shot of the pyramid when you first enter the cave. It makes for a gorgeous shot, and it's really cool it's not just a background element, but the same physical structure that you walk up to in the map. Also in Mayday's outro cutscene, they outline the sides of the Ark colony, and of course it's shaped like a brain. I love the design of the gargoyle, and it's this perfect mix of otherworldly traits, yet has things that we as people recognize, and it makes for a perfect concoction of animal and alien. The same can be said for the ancestors. Also, you can create the regular, fire, and lightning Venomex, but the cedar Venomex is nowhere to be found, and you know what, rip bozo, good riddance to that thing too. And that's Awakening. I don't hate this map, and the visuals are something that bring the experience for me up to an 11. It has a ton of variety on how you choose to explore and upgrade your kit, but the level progression is a near one-to-one copy of Point of Contact, and the new enemies aren't really doing it any favors. The Arc attachment is super neat, but once you have it, you'll never want to go back. And the Venomex is a weapon that exists, but 3 maps in a row with the same wonder weapon is kinda lame. But overall, Awakening is a fine experience that doesn't do enough to differentiate itself besides the locale, and more features that take advantage of the low grav and environment would have gone a long way. But with that said, let's see what the game has in store for us in the grand finale. Let's hop right into Exodus. Exodus is the grand finale of Extinction. Taking place in a garish apocalyptic LA, Exodus pits the remnants of humanity against the full onslaught of cryptid forces. The map provides another shake-up to the cryptid slaying formula, and honestly, as a final map, it works really well. The stakes have never been higher, the enemies have never been more plentiful, and just about every face comes back for one final fight. It's do or die for the human race. So let's get into how they plan on surviving, and how none of this is totally retconned in the Beast from Beyond with Exodus. Exodus, like every other map, has an extremely simple narrative. With humanity more than lost the fight, a select few will be taking a space shuttle to the stars, where the cryptids can't reach them, but they can't launch their shuttle to do the gargoyle storm, preventing the ship from getting far. Thus, it's up to Sif 1 to reactivate power, charge the now completed Medusa device, and detonate the thing so something of humanity can survive. Exodus tells a bleak tale, and I want to reiterate how cool it is that the developers wanted to tell this story. It makes it all the more engaging and honestly really refreshing. These co-op modes pit our heroes against unfathomable odds, and usually they escape with not a hair split nor anyone affected. The only story that managed to accomplish something similar to this was Black Ops 1 with Moon, and the subsequent fallout of those events in Black Ops 2, Mob of the Dead, and World War II zombies post the Shadow Throne. It makes the adventure feel all the more scrappy, and places the narrative value on everything that you find, including schematics and traps. Then there's the intel. Most of it states what we already know, but we do get one important intel from Archer of all people. This intel is really cool, and seems to have Archer of all people, who should have been dead on Awakening, seemingly speaking to Godfather. Towards the end of the intel, it seems to be that it's actually the ancestors that are speaking and using Archer's voice as the conduit towards humanity. It basically explains that Samantha Cross is a double agent, and it's part of the cryptid's plans to stop the launch, or even possibly kill all the people on the Ark.
Like Samantha Cross. She's a sleeper. A double agent. Everything that's happened. Everything that's about to happen aboard your space station. It's all part of the plan. Their plan, General. Not yours.
It is also stated by Godfather that one day those left on the Ark plan on retaking Earth. And honestly, that idea for an Extinction 2 sounds super cool. flipping the entire premise on its head and making humanity the one-day future alien conquerors of Earth. To repower the generators, players must open doors to find them. There are 3 distinct paths around the map, and the more doors you open, the more resources that you'll find, but also the greater variety and ferocity of enemies that you'll face. Every time a door is opened, a 2-minute sequence will begin where cryptids will attack. This ramps up rather quickly as the game goes on, and unlike what Forsaken tries to accomplish, Exodus pushes you and your teammates to the limits, and it's easily the hardest map of the bunch, which is a good thing considering it's the finale. Sadly, there's nothing to do, nor defend when opening the doors, leading to the mechanic feeling like it's missing a second half. Like maybe you should have to defend generators that are also opening locked doors, or maybe you have to defend a debris crushing machine from cryptids so you can progress further into the city. I don't know. It's cool that you don't have to lug anything around in the final map, but at the same time, you can just open a door and make your way back to a wider, safer space, defeating the entire purpose of some of the arenas, which are meant to be more difficult because of the limited maneuverability and lines of sight. But like, you can just choose not to fight in them. Once you travel into the parking garage, you can find the schematic for the NX-1, a wonder weapon with infinite ammo that fires condensed balls of Cortex energy. When charged, the weapon can take down the shields of ancestors, one-shots nearly every enemy, and deals large damage to rhinos. While it fires slowly, it has massive utility against the map's bosses, and should be used carefully as timing and precision are everything. Fun fact, the NX-1 is an Easter egg to the previously cancelled COD Future Warfare, which was codenamed NX-1. This game was eventually scrapped and reworked into Call of Duty Ghost. Also around the map are schematics for Venom grenades and NX-1 grenades, which have even greater utility than the wonder weapon simply for their ease of access and use. And in order to complete the map, players must charge 6 generators around the map, and these only get more difficult as the game progresses. At specific generators, players will get their first glimpse of an ancestor. Now the star of the show, the ancestor shows up and intends to make its chaos known. These beasts are difficult to take down for an inexperienced player, and it's best to defeat them before they kill you. Ancestors can summon protective shields, lift players with telekinesis and nearly kill them, shoot out a large black orb of death, and summon 2 hunters much like a rhino. On their own, they aren't that threatening, but when with the rest of the cryptids and needing to defend a generator, things get out of hand very quickly. I love the ancestors as a concept, and it perfectly concludes the game, capping off the hierarchy of the cryptids while providing great gameplay mini-bosses. They also drop you a skill point. When defeated, ancestors explode into a ball of light. Honestly, it reminds me of the entity from MWZ. Also showing up alongside ancestors are scouts, seekers, scorpions, hunters, rhinos, phantoms, gargoyles, bombers, and mammoths. Literally everything but a cedar. And there are some sequences which are just completely insane, like opening the last door is basically a death trap. Once all 6 generators have been restored, you can meet up with Samantha Cross at the main power station, and she'll have a few cryptids under her spell. She then proceeds to kill them, stating that we'll need to be the ones to stay around to activate the Cortex, and she makes her way to the shuttle to get on board. It is unclear what her true motives are, but with one final send-off, Sif-1 begins the task of sacrificing themselves in a final stand, defending what is now known as the Medusa device.
You didn't just save my life. You changed the fate of the human species. We won't forget that.
The final lockdown is a glorified soul box, with everything the game has in its pockets being thrown at you. The walls of the base are destroyed by the ancestors, your traps are slowly turned offline, and eventually, it all comes to a head as 6 ancestors descend on the base throughout the whole sequence. The final encounter is nuts and a ton of fun, even if it mechanically isn't anything that engaging. Once the Medusa device is charged, it can be detonated and Sif-1 are killed as the device goes off. In the outro, the Gargoyle Storm is wiped out, and the Ark is able to get off Earth, saving whatever remains of humanity. Now high above the clouds, Samantha Cross decrees herself as either the killer of humanity or its savior, and it's left ambiguous what's true and what's not. And that's Extinction, a story that totally isn't ruined by another game. The ending leaving Samantha's alignment a mystery is really cool, although I still can't believe they also chose the name Samantha for their all-powerful young adult with connections to the supernatural force of the game. Like, guys, any other name would have worked. And again, I really like how humanity loses. It makes me want to see the remnants of Earth take it back a la Godzilla Earth. My only complaint about the ending is the sacrifice of Sif-1. They aren't characters, just merely destructive forces of nature that do what the narrative need them to do. Some character would have made them and the game mode altogether a lot more interesting. I really like the NX-1, but its combat prowess is overshadowed by the Venom X, and due to its slow projectile speed when charged, it feels more like a gimmick than an actual wonder weapon. Also, it doesn't help that it has a pretty generic design, and it just looks like a big old glass tube. There's also the 2 Neversoft Easter eggs. One grants you every bonus in the game for 3 minutes by finding 3 Neversoft eyes around the map, and the second can be activated by spelling Neversoft on this sign. This grants you a secret intel of the Neversoft team celebrating their merger with Infinity Ward, and is a celebration and send-off to what they've accomplished. Also of note, this is the only map not to spawn additional cryptids in between objectives, further adding to the sense of emptiness the map realistically shouldn't have. And that's Exodus. Despite how much I love the map, it feels incredibly small, and it's probably one of the worst looking in the entire game. The yellows and browns and grays all give this experience this washed out Burger Town-esque look, and is a far cry from the beauty of Awakening. The gameplay is the map's strength, and you and your team are required to work together to win, which is something Zombies has always struggled to balance. The map could use more things to do, and during down periods it reeks of lifelessness, but when the action gets going, it's unforgettable. But before we close out, there's still a few things left to cover.
So that was a fucking lie.
Extinction still has 2 modes left to cover, but first, there's the hardcore mode, which is the easier of the 2 to explain. Being, well, more difficult, hardcore mode strips the player of their crosshairs, enemies are more aggressive, and skill points are only earned by completing challenges. This mode is insane, and even on point of contact alone, you'll fight more rhinos than you even knew existed. If you want an incredibly clear breakdown of how insane this mode gets, I'd highly recommend my buddy Hooded's Hardcore Mayday video to truly get an idea of the experience. Then there's Chaos Mode. Made in the style of old arcade shooters, Chaos Mode is a simple shoot 'em up that requires you to keep up the timer by killing cryptids and maintaining a combo. It's a fun side mode that invokes what Treyarch has tried to accomplish with Zombie Rush in BO4 and Cranked in BO6. By raising your combo, you are given additional abilities and perks, but no matter what you do, the end is inevitable, and matches last no more than 15 minutes tops. To aid in this pick up and play feel, you are confined to one area per map you choose, and at around 5 minutes, you'll already be dealing with rhinos. But there's really not much more to talk about. It's a bare bones idea that serves its purpose, but honestly doesn't leave me with a whole lot of room for analysis, which is how I'd best describe the entire game. Extinction is an incredible side mode. It's one of the few that's a breath of... I wrote breath of breath air. It's one of the few that's a breath of fresh air, and at times better designed than even a good majority of undead experiences. There's nothing outright terrible, and the maps have a high level of quality to each of them. The wonder weapons are unique, the story is somewhat interesting, and the enemies constantly steal the show in just about every moment. But where I think the game falters is its lack of distinct playable characters and the linearity of the game, despite that linearity also being a pro. I think in future installments, Extinction could grow and evolve as a game mode that changes how players play and the way that they progress through the story. Because at its core, Extinction can feel like a one and done deal. Sure, you have the relics, but the maps don't realistically change mechanics-wise in each playthrough, which is something even Zombies has pigeonholed itself into in more recent years. But at least Zombies has some more expansive options and gameplay variety between killing and quest solving. In Extinction, both of these actions are tied together, and at the same time, I don't feel the developers did a very good job at not exhausting the player at around the 1 hour mark. As stated in the Mayday section of the game, it does begin to wear on you at about that time. Unlike Zombies, the difficulty of Extinction during combat phases is always cranked up to 11, which is somewhat indicative of more modern Zombies entries, but you get the idea. And the game mode is simply more exhausting due to how many varying elements you have to juggle at one time, which is again another criticism levied against Zombies in its more chaotic entries. And these criticisms begin to show up more the longer you play and the more maps you complete. Mechanically, each one shakes up things a little bit, but at the same time, nothing is ever really done to change how you approach combat. The game stays in its lane, which is a good thing. These are just small fundamental issues that realistically can't be solved without reinventing the wheel on what Extinction is as a concept. Simply an observation that kept popping up while I played. Extinction is an extremely special co-op mode, and despite what I say and what happened to it in Beast, I'd love to see anyone take another crack at the concept. It's a world full of ton of creativity, and maybe one day it'll come back to reclaim what it's owed.
They believed my power could make the difference between survival and extinction. They were right.
Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this video, why not try checking out some of my other reviews of AW, World War II, Cold War, IW, and MWZ. And if you already watched those, then why not try checking out my review of every single Call of Duty Zombies map in 1 minute or less. But with that said, thank you all so much for watching. And remember, keep on slaying.